Prissy Njoki. I come from Kenya, and I'm attending the ICC UNFCCC climate change meeting at Durban. As you can see, we have a lot of activities which are going on. Durban is a hot place, I can say. We have the main conference that is taking place where parties are making discussions. We also have side events and booths for partners. And it's generally a place with very many activities. For first time attendance, it can be confusing because you don't have a particular program of what you're supposed to do per day. It's up to you to identify events and meetings that you can attend that are relevant to what you're doing. I can also say that there is a very huge turn-up of NGOs as observers. This is something we really appreciate because for many years, the state actors have been just making the discussions on their own without including the non-state actors. And apparently the non-state actors, the NGOs, the development workers, are bringing in a lot of key inputs towards the development of communities that are also targeted by the state actors. So I would like to congratulate the UNFCCC for giving accreditation to so many of NGOs, so many of community development workers who are outside the governments. Now, to come to my main discussion, I wanted to just commend India for what they are doing. Number one, we realized that during the climate change negotiations, India is one of the big emitters on greenhouse gases. But partly it's not because of the industrialization that is going on in India, but it is something that can be handled because it is because of felling of trees. I happened to be in India in the month of October, and I visited the states of Uttarakhand, particularly the Himalayas. I'm not so sure whether those are the right regions. I visited Uttar Pradesh. I also visited the New Delhi. And something that can be very commendable in India is that within the city centers, we have very many forested sections. And it is only the felling of trees that is going on in the Himalayas region. A lot of indigenous trees have been cut down, and very big chunks of land, you can see they are empty. Probably we can also appreciate that there is a lot of planting of new varieties of trees and not the indigenous. So to some extent, the damage is being controlled. But something else we need also to appreciate about India is that India was underdeveloped a couple of years ago. Indians are very hardworking people, and they have fought the system to keep up their industrialized systems. For instance, when you look at the Tata cars, the Maruti, in India you will not find many models of cars. They have refrained from the temptation to import cars from Japan, from US, from UK, those developed countries. India has struggled gradually with its system. They developed the first car, they moved on. Of course, they have paid a lot of price, and in Africa, that is something that I can say I really pay tribute to. I really appreciate that they were really willing to pay that price. It is something that African countries can learn from, because in Africa you find a country imports virtually from spoons, innerwear, clothes, shoes, everything is important. But in India you'll find that they even have industries that make their own clothes, process cotton from Indian farmers, and sell the same clothes within the bigger population of India. That way they are able to generate their own income within the country. They reduce over dependency, spending a lot of costs importing things from the external continents. Another issue that I may wish to say about India is that as much as we say that some parts of India are underdeveloped, communities in India are very food secure. Even on the mountain peaks, I was 800,000 feet above sea level to talk to small-scale farmers. You find that the system in India government has been able to protect the farmer seed, the seed that the farmer uses to produce their own crops. They have a system whereby even before you build a house, the Indian farmer builds an underground store for the seed and the food. That has ensured that even the poorest of the most poor have food, even in times of when the weather is very harsh. In times of drought, they can still have a backfall resilience. here in Durban, as we promote smart climate agriculture, we need to borrow a leaf from India seed security. We also need to borrow a leaf from the fact that they have diversified the food sources. In India, virtually every weed, anything that grows is edible. They have a strong way of processing this food and bringing it back to the community, which has also, in actual sense, ensured a healthy population. Most of the Indians eat spices. They take a lot of herbs from the forest. They have the strongest medicine system we would ever have in history because of making use of the environment, making use of the tree species, the shrubs that we have, and turning it to medicine. We also have a lot of herbalists, what you call Ayurvedic. I'm not sure of the word. Ayurvedic is use of spices to treat diseases. We have, even in Kenya, people who are flown in, day out, to go and get treatment from India. And the most unfortunate thing is that they leave the same herbs within their country, go to take those herbs from India, just because they are not willing to pay an extra price, to go an extra mile, to realize the resources that they have at home. So even as we go towards, we want to embrace climate smart agriculture, we need to explore those opportunities. Use of traditional herbs, use of indigenous trees to make our own medicine, making use of the environment, making use of every tree species, every shrub to get our own food, diversifying the food sources. And it's something that we can all borrow a leaf from. Thank you.
I'm Ajita Tiwari from the Indian Network on Ethics and Climate Change based in Mumbai. And we are a network of organizations and individuals from different parts of the country who have been looking at climate change largely from the macro-micro perspective. And INEC believes that the climate problem is part of the larger environmental crisis leading to social justice concerns. And it is in this context that we have been looking primarily at the ethical aspect of communities who are the most marginalized and the most vulnerable to climate change. I have with me Betty Pressy from Kenya, who is a specialist on women gender issues and has been closely looking at climate change and gender from a environmental perspective. And we would like to know from you, Betty, what brings you to Durban, and how do you see that the agenda of women has evolved over the COPs, assuming that you have been a regular COPper? Can you just share your insights with us?
Thank you, Ajita, for that question. One, you wanted to know what brings me to Durban. To be very precise, what brings me to Durban is to come and try and share the issues that are affecting women in relation to climate change. One, when we talk of women and the issues of farming, they are the key custodians of the farming systems in most of the African continent. It is a woman who knows where the seed is. They are the biggest labor producers in the farm. They are the ones who handle food after post-harvest technology. And apparently, it is also very sad that women don't own land in Africa. They have no access to making key decisions in relation to land, yet this is the land that helps them to meet the means to production. We have also the woman being the custodian for water resources within a household. It is a woman who uses water for cooking, water for washing. They take care of the bigger needs of water in a household. So when we talk of climate change affecting the rains, there is lesser water in the continent. The woman suffers the bite most. We have had a study in Kenya, which was conducted by Pelham Kenya and Bread for the World, where we were trying to find out from deep within a community that lives next to the forest, some of the challenges they are facing because of climate-related challenges, insufficient water, inability to produce the crops in time, and the food security issues. And we found that where the points where women used to fetch water, which were relatively more safer, have dried up. So what happens? They move deeper into the forest where they are able to access water, and this puts their lives at risk. Some of them are raped as they look for water. Others are abducted at those points. And when you look at Africa, speaking about sexual violation, it's also an issue. So they don't say it, they suffer in silence. Another issue that we found seriously affecting women is the change in weather patterns. They no longer know when is the right time to plant. They no longer have their harvest on time. This has led to men getting more stigmatized within households, feeling they have no solutions to offer, and as a result, they are migrating to towns to go look for a job. This leaves the woman more burdened with the family responsibilities and a man who has gone to town and is not coming back. So what I think is that as we address the climate change issues, we need to move our focus to women as well. What issues can we address to reduce the gender inequalities? Because we talk of gender inequality being a form of injustice, but climate change is bringing more of this gender inequality. It is perpetrating to climate injustice.
Well, given the context of South Africa, which is not really different from India, we would like to know from you how have you been able to push for this agenda in the negotiations?
Okay, the much we could do is to attend side events. We held a workshop in TVT, it's called the Valley Trust within South Africa, and came up with a declaration which will be read in one of the side events and in one of the high profile meetings for for the Germany MPs. We'll also have the same declaration read in various high profile meetings so that the parties can take up some of the suggestions in those declarations to the main discussions. The big problem we are having here in Durban is that we don't have a set system for the observers to give their key inputs into the negotiations. We don't have a platform like a blog that takes up all the issues being discussed by the side meetings, by the observers, into the key discussion room. That's what I would say.
Betty, we have been, since I remember, in the last 10 years, we have been always reading these statements that women are the energy managers, but they are largely ignored because they come from the unorganized sector. But given this, how do you say, the statements that were said yesterday, 10 years back, that women are energy managers, but they are not part of the design and implementation of international climate frameworks? You see, how do you see this moving? How do you, those statements which were valid 10 years back are whole even to this day? Where do you think we have lacked? Where is it that, we've not been able to break through?
Ajita, I think this is a very sad situation, and it needs to be approached from individual perspectives, like even for us organizations who are working with grassroots communities. How do we make sure that the voices of those women there who cannot speak English, who cannot write, who cannot read, how do we make sure that some of those issues are brought onto the table for discussion? Apparently, even the parties who are from government from various countries in the world, they just hold high-profile discussions in boardrooms where those women are not represented. They don't even know what is going on. Then they bring a position here, which is from a boardroom. So if this trend continues, we are bound not to be making any changes. It will only be enough changes if we now move lower to a lower level where we incorporate everyone's inputs, including the rural women.
So just very briefly, can you tell us how do you see the way forward in terms of meaningful and strategic participation of women in particular to the UN framework for climate change?
Okay, one, I have to appreciate that even the UN has set aside a section or a huge chunk of its work to addressing issues of women. We've had a lot of declarations and human rights documents done by the UN to make sure that women are incorporated in development. And we can also appreciate that the level we are at today is not where we were 10 years. Could be it's only that it's a slow process, but somehow we will be there. But when it comes to issues of climate change, what I would request the countries that are very developed is that they need to consider setting aside the climate change funding. That is the only way we will be able to empower the women back at home. Because when we talk of technological adoption, how they can move from the simple things they have been doing and advance them to increase food production, it requires capital. It requires some money given into it. So the only way we can support is to be able to finance some of those initiatives. And when the woman is able to generate income on their own, it comes automatically. They'll get empowered, they'll become decision makers, they'll be able to attend conferences. But when we are still talking about simple issues of starvation, a woman starving to death, a household starving to death, we cannot talk of empowerment when basic needs are not being met. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Betty, for being with us, and we appreciate the insights. And I think the gender issue needs to be well integrated in the UN Convention of Negotiations, and there has to be a larger participation of women from across the world in taking up the negotiations further. Thank you. Yeah.